Hi, everyone. I'm James Protin. I'd like to give a special thank you to our sponsors for the podcast, Candelore's Barking Beauties, with 5 locations throughout the region, and His Place Coffee Community and more here in Menneson for hosting us. Welcome to the podcast, everyone. It's great to be back here in Menneson after a couple of weeks on the road. Joining me today in the co-hosting chair, as always, is my man Jack Cadwallader. And our guest today, our honored guest today, is retired Marine Brigadier General David Papak. David, thank you for joining us. It's great to have you here.
You're welcome. Glad to be here.
And Mr. Jack, do you want to explain to our viewers, all 10 of them, exactly how you we came upon General Papak?
Well, we were getting new neighbors, and from what I understood, they were retired. So I thought to myself, well, I hope our activity or anything that we might be doing doesn't, we don't become pests to these older retired folk. And I looked down in the backyard, and there is a guy twice my size cutting a tree down, carrying one in one arm and carrying a cow in the other arm. And I said to Bunny, I don't think we have your average retiree. And I knew his father. His father was cut from a different cloth, and so is this man right here. Very impressive resume. David, thank you so much.
You're welcome,
for coming
Jack.
in with us today.
It's good to sit and talk with you.
No,
we see each other in the yard passing and waving, but we never really sit and talk.
Yeah, it's a small community. Like you said, last night we ran into each other, exactly. at the Valley Inn Sportsman's. You're Mon Valley Catholic grad, right? And growing up Catholic in the Mon Valley, I can relate to that. I did that myself, and although I went to Shalwari High School, but you were, my understanding, and this could be just could be one of those Mon Valley stories, but my understanding is that you were recruited to Annapolis by Roger Staubach. He was involved in your recruitment?
Well, Roger's kind of involved in a lot of people's recruitment.
Yeah, there's no doubt. There's no doubt.
Of the alum, Roger is just a phenomenal proponent for the academy.
Oh, yeah.
Of course, as he should be. But no, I met one on my recruiting trip.
Okay.
It just so happened that he was visiting that weekend Navy in Annapolis.
Okay.
Because he had just, he was still with the Cowboys then. This is 1970, 71.
Okay.
And so I met him there. He was attending a function or whatever. But the guy that actually recruited me was a guy named Joe Bugle.
Sure.
And Bugle has been in the NFL for many years.
Yes.
But he was from Monongahela.
Right.
And so he's the guy that kind of came. And that was a very unpopular time, certainly in 1969 and 70.
Absolutely.
Because the Vietnam War is winding down, but it's still pretty hot and heavy. But anyway, all that to say, it was Joe Bugle who actually was the coach of recruitment. But Roger, over the years, he knows lots of people, and I go back there on a regular basis, and you see him all the time.
Excellent,
Yeah.
excellent. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I'm a huge supporter, and I'm very impressed with the service academies. I put the service academies at an equal, if not above, the Ivy League schools, because I think that the commitment is so much greater beyond that. The academics speak for themselves, but it's a commitment, right? I mean,
It is, and I tell people, and I work with people. In fact, we have a Ringgold student now Ethan Gamble, who just finished his freshman year there.
Okay.
And we have a young lady who just graduated from Ringgold the other night, Kira Gerard, who's going to West Point.
Oh, okay.
And so we've got people there, and I work with a lot of people over the course of moving from Annapolis and around my military time or my Marine Corps time of kids that wanted to go to the academy. But I always tell them, if you want to be an engineer, God bless you, go to Carnegie Mellon. You'll get a good engineering education and so on. But if you want to be a leader, and this school, West Point Air Force, and I say that generically speaking, but we train leaders.
right.
That's what it's about.
Right.
Okay, now you may not want to have the aspiration of serving. I served 33 years in the Marine Corps. That may not be your goal or your dream.
Sure.
But if you don't want and understand the idea of wanting to lead, develop your own leadership skills,
Right.
then this is not necessarily the place to go to school. Now, there are people that go to school there for a lot of reasons. I just wanted to play against Notre Dame. I mean, seriously. When I was being taught, my sister was a flight attendant, an airline stewardess for many, many years, and I can remember going to the Pittsburgh airport, and I would come out, and I would sit in the pilot's seat because the pilot was a friend or whatever, and I'd sit there and be kind of playing with the yoke of the airliner. These
Sure.
old prop airplanes at the Greater Pittsburgh Airport.
Yeah.
So the idea of flying was always in my mind, and so that was a place that I could go get and my dad was a steel worker. I mean, I knew I was going to have to go to school on sports,
Right.
that type of thing. And I thought, well, maybe this is a good way to get an education that doesn't cost anything monetarily. I can play Division I football,
Right.
and I can fly in the Navy. And I
Okay.
thought, okay, but this is a military school.
Right.
And this is a different world. This is not like going to Pitt or West Virginia or back then California State or whatever it was called that back then. But this is a little bit different. But over the course of looking back now, I mean, it's who I am today. Those 4 years there, and I went to a year of prep school, and we send a lot of our athletes to the prep schools.
Absolutely.
It's who I am today, and so I owe everything to those 4 years of foundational training. But it's all about leading. That's
Right.
when I talk to young people, and if they don't bring up in a conversation about serving and wanting to lead. Now, leading could be leading your plumbing company. It could be
Right.
leading your football team at the local high school. But somewhere where you are influencing other people. Now, as a 17, 18-year-old, that's a pretty tall order to
Right.
have that conversation with a 17-year-old about, well, what are your leadership skills? What are your characteristics that you feel are your strengths?
A lot of kids that age lead and don't realize they're doing it.
They don't, absolutely.
They tend to do it more by example.
They-
They don't realize
they don't
it's
have a
not
clue.
conscious
Some are
decision.
born, some are
Yeah.
just born.
And every now and then you'll see a captain or the head of the National Honor Society or whatever that really sticks out and kind of, but the idea though is that if that's not in your thinking, then no,
Right.
go to Cal U or Pitt or someplace, locally
Well,
speaking.
I get it. I've been in the
But-
engineering
yeah.
business for a long time.
Well, you know that.
And we're blessed with, again, CMU, Pitt, West Virginia,
Yeah.
Penn State. So we're blessed with great engineering schools. And that's definitely not what the service academies are known for.
No.
Right?
And the idea of serving, and a lot of times too, kids 17, 18 years old don't quite understand, and we've all raised kids, teenagers, where the world is all about them.
Right.
And
Right.
good, bad, right, wrong, don't disrespect, but that's just the way it is, that maturing process. So you have an individual who now you're trying to talk to about being part of something that's bigger than they are.
Right.
And there are only a certain handful of kids at age that understands that.
Oh, yeah, you're
You know,
absolutely right.
And now we kind of understand it. We try and teach that through sports. You're part of the team.
Yes.
You're not just the point guard or the pitcher. You're
That's
part of this
exactly
team.
right.
So that whole thing has to kind of,
Now, do you find it from your era to this generation? Do you find is there a drastic change in the type of kids that you're getting and the type of attitudes that you're getting, as far as where you
Well-
almost want to throw your hands up and say, "You're giving me nothing to work with,"
well, I'll have my 9th grandchild in July. We have 8 grandchildren now, and the 9th is coming in July the 25th, in fact. But that's a hard question. We could sit here for weeks and talk about
Absolutely.
this era of athlete versus,
Right.
I'm kind of removed almost 2 generations now. I've
No, you're
got
exactly
kids that
right.
are in their mid-40s.
Yep, me as well.
And I've got teenagers that are 20.
Right.
So, but the idea and being around young people, being around Navy football like I still am, I'm very involved down there now, even still living up here.
The Sarah kid that graduated there a few years
Bernie
ago.
Sarah
Bernie from
was like a
Modesto
son to me.
kid, yeah. His dad's a
he
very
lived
good
at my
friend.
house when he wasn't at the academy type thing. So
Tremendous young man.
very close to Bernie. But the whole idea, to answer your question, Jack, the whole idea I think is the distractions are over the top
Mm-hmm.
with young people now.
100%.
Okay.
Nothing like we were there. I was a few years
No.
behind you. I was a 77 grad from Charlotte.
Yeah,
Right? You were
yeah.
71.
71, yeah.
So, that era of the 70s, and then you came along a few years, about 10 years after that,
Yeah.
But
we'll skip over him because that's a really bad.
That's a soft generation. I think. Or mine was the first soft.
But the idea, though, is that, and we mentioned Coach Ravazio, Joe Ravazio. I mean,
Sure.
And I'm not going to get into the point because I used to hate when my dad, Depression era, World War II guy, would say when I
Right.
was a kid, when,
Right.
you know, when I was in high school. And I don't want to say
Back in the
that.
days, always
Back in the day, and we talk about that, you know, at our Navy's, you know, when I get with my Navy teammates, you know, about
Right.
whether it's the schedule, whether it's the equipment, whether it's the offense, whether it's whatever it is, there's a difference. But I
Sure.
think that the mentality of young people today, if you can channel some of this stuff, I mean, you have more advanced technology and equipment and nutrition and all the things that you have.
Right.
I mean, I first went to Navy, we didn't even have a weight room. In
Yeah.
1970, 71, the only guys that lifted weights was the shot putter and the discus guy. You know, weightlifting didn't really come in until Randy White at Maryland.
True story. Yes.
Kind of, he was the big
Yeah.
guy that could bench whatever, 300, 350. And that was so, and then strength coaches. We never had a strength coach until I went back to Navy and coached in the 80s as a Marine. Then they started to go to the Redskins and find, hey, we need to start taking a look at what these kids are eating and what
All of a
they're
sudden, you're
doing.
paying attention to those
because
things.
the injuries,
Yeah.
you know, if you got a knee back then, you're gone.
You're gone.
Right.
Okay, now look, I mean, you,
Oh, yeah.
and,
They're
but
going
it-
on in college and still having
Yeah.
long pro careers.
Well,
so they have so many more advances now. So I think, you know, the speed, the strength, the agility, all these things that you watch the combines on TV
Right.
or you watch, you know, young development players in your
Sure.
hockey and different things. It's different. You know, it's like who's the best quarterback, Roger Staubach or,
Absolutely.
you know, Tom Brady or whatever.
Well,
however you want to compare.
yeah, it's never easy to compare.
It's never easy to
right?
compare eras.
I mean, think about a guy like, for example, Monongahela guy, Fred Cox, right?
Sure.
When you think about what Fred Cox accomplished,
Yeah.
okay, he was a running back. He was,
Yeah.
I didn't believe he was All-State. He was an All-American at Pitt. I believe he was.
Cox,
Wound up-
Cunningham, and the 3 C's. I forget the third one. Yeah.
You're exactly right.
Yeah.
Wound up being, when he retired from the Vikings, the leading scorer in NFL history as a kicker, right? But he became a kicker because that was the only way he had a chance to get in the league,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
those kind of guys, I mean, you know, who's a better hitter, Stan Musial or,
Yeah.
or Mike Trout?
Right.
You know, how do you judge?
So but I think it's twice as, not twice, but it's a lot harder to coach and to get these kids focused,
them.
to reach them, okay,
Yeah.
and to stay focused. Because now, as we all know, good, bad, right, or wrong, it's a 12-month. You don't have
Oh, it is.
multiple.
100%.
I mean, we all played football, basketball, and baseball
That's exactly
for
right.
10 years,
That's
type
exactly
thing.
right.
Now you go and it's one sport.
You almost have to specialize.
You have to
Kenny
specialize.
Kenny had the Tommy John surgery last year,
Right.
and Dr. Bradley told us, "Is this kid take any time off from hockey?" And
Yeah. No.
I said no, and they said
exactly right.
it wasn't the
Yeah.
you know the hit wasn't the only contributing factor to this surgery. His ligament was
Just worn out.
Yeah, yeah.
Just worn out.
No, it's year round. Whether it's, you know, I have one granddaughter who's a girls lacrosse player. They just won the state championship in Maryland, which is a big deal in lacrosse in
yeah.
Maryland.
Lacrosse is big in
But,
Maryland. Yep.
My daughter's like, Dad, does this ever end? You know, because I'm trying to fund a little bit of it too, and
Yeah.
it's year round these
is.
programs, and you know the cost of these year round sports and stuff.
100%.
But
We have-
anyway, so
we
it's
have
a
12
different
grandkids,
different
so I
world.
get it. Yeah,
Oh,
it's-
so you know that.
It's
You know
it's a tough thing, and you're chasing them all
Yeah.
out, and it is different. And again, this thing, the internet, right? We didn't have anything like that.
No.
So you know, kids have access to so much information, and
Yeah.
it really contributes to the already difficult job of being
Yeah.
a teenager,
Yeah.
right? It's interesting.
Right.
I want to talk a little bit about. And by the way, you flew helicopters, right? Not
Right.
jets.
Right.
Okay.
Helicopters. Yeah.
So yeah, that's fascinating. So
Oh,
helicopters
that's
amaze me. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just
Yeah, that's
totally
a whole
amazing.
nother story.
That's a whole other story altogether. We'll circle back to that.
Yeah.
But I want to talk about the foundation, the Travis Manion Foundation.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about that, because that's a big deal for me, being a military parent now. You know, you never thought about those things. That's where I got these from Boot Campaign. I saw a thing online. I thought, oh, that's really cool. You can support the you know, blah blah. So I needed boots anyway, right? So. And I wear them all the time simply because it's a small way
Sure.
of just showing support.
Support.
Right? So give us a little bit of background, not only about the foundation, but how you came to be involved with it.
Well, Travis Manion was a young Marine who was killed in Iraq in 2007, April 29, 2007. And his mom and dad, his dad and I kind of grew up in the Marine Corps.
Okay.
He wasn't in aviation, but we met each other in sports. He was a big Eagles fan and Steelers. And I forget, I think we were both stationed in D.C. at the time. And our wives hit it off. Well, he was a big lacrosse player, Tom
Okay.
was, Colonel Manion. And he had two kids, and they were both high school, college athletes, a daughter
Okay.
and Travis. Travis was a wrestler. He went to LaSalle Catholic High School in Philadelphia.
Sure.
LaSalle College Catholic High School. And so he was a lacrosse player and a wrestler, comes to Navy, wrestles, all-East wrestler, and he goes into the Marine Corps. And he's a logistician in the Marine Corps, and he's with the Reconnaissance Battalion in Iraq.
Okay.
And this is in 2005. He goes and completes one deployment, comes back home for a year, goes back for a second deployment. Now he's one of these trainers for the Iraqis. He's got half of a Marine group with him and half of an Iraqi group with him.
Okay.
That they're both working together. And he leads a patrol, and they get lured into a building by a young kid, 9, 10 years old.
Oh, jeez.
And now they come out of the building, and they're ambushed on 3 sides. Travis, the sappy plates that we wear, these armored plating, covers everything but under your arm. And certainly the snipers know that.
They know that, right.
And he got shot right under the arm and was killed as he was pulling back a Navy corpsman and an Iraqi soldier. And he was awarded the Silver Star, which is the 3rd highest.
Right.
You have the Medal of Honor, then the Service Cross, and then the
Right.
Silver Star. And then his parents, as we all have in the military, we have this Servicemen's Group Life Insurance, SGLI. Your son
Okay.
has it, everybody has
Sure.
it.
Yeah.
And the family started, well, what do we want to do with this money? So the mother, Janet Manion, who has since passed with cancer, but she is just a shaker and mover in this whole area that they live in Doylestown, Bucks County.
Sure.
And they start this foundation of how can they take the ideals and the virtues that Travis had shown as a young
Right.
man, and how can they help other veterans transitioning from the military to the civilian world? How can they be there for Gold Star family members? How can they, one of the things that Travis, in between his deployments, he visited Rescue Squad 1 at Ground Zero. And he comes back,
okay.
he spends a whole day up there in New York. And he comes back and he tells his dad, he gives his dad a baseball hat. And he says, Dad, I don't want you to ever forget, everybody's patting the military on the back. Rightly so. But don't ever forget these first responders.
Yep.
Again, he just spent the day there. This is in 2006. And so he comes back. So that whole thing kind of was the beginning of the thought of having this 9/11 Heroes Run. So from Seattle to Key West, ships, bases all over the world now, on around 9/11. And my wife and I were the race directors in Annapolis, and it was a run around the stadium. We
Okay.
have hundreds of these runs all over the country honoring first responders. So just envision here in Menneson, Charlotte, or wherever, on around 9/11, we bring out the EMT people, the firefighters, a few of the cops. We bring out retired people, military people, and it's not about the run. It's just a 5K run.
Right.
But it's a way for that day for the community to thank first responders.
Right.
Recognize. You have the fire chief on the back of the truck starting the run. We have vendors. It's an afternoon thing. It's just
That's
a great.
And Mrs. Manion started this.
We started the whole foundation, but the 9/11 Heroes Run, the first one was run by Tom's brother in Doylestown. The second year, Janet Manion comes to me. We're living in Annapolis now, and she says, I want you to do one at the camera. I said, Jan, you're nuts. I'm not running or directing some runner. I'm just a plodding 10K kind of guy. 2 knee replacements, that whole thing. Because we run a marathon when Travis was killed. We did a marathon in his honor. Now the Travis Manion team Foundation are the largest contingent of runners in the Marine Corps Marathon.
Wow.
About the last 4 or 5 years, there's more people. But anyway, all that to say, we started this run to honor first responders.
Okay.
So that's one of the legs of the stool every year. But this Character Does Matter program is around the leaders of tomorrow. Just think of that. Kenny, he's the leader of tomorrow.
Absolutely.
Forget about hockey for a second, but just as he moves on into his adulthood, what is he going to do? You know, sports has taught him something. Academics has taught him something if he excelled or whatever. So now our focus is, because we just don't think, and nobody's going to, I don't think, dispute it, the fact that the youth of today are thirsting for direction around this kind of topic. There, you know, whether it's single-family homes, fatherless homes, I don't care what it is, you don't have the conversation around integrity, moral courage, service, leadership, understanding what your strengths are and your weaknesses as a 17, 18-year-old kid,
Right.
young person. So we go in, we're not trying, I tell people all the time, we're not trying to solve world hunger. This is not the quick fix pill for our youth. But if I can go in to a high school or a football team or a baseball team or the church youth group or the scouting group down the street, and I can just impact one or two kids,
One or two.
and I can flip the switch on
That's
one
what
or
it's
two
all
kids,
about.
Yeah.
That's what
that's
it's
all I
about.
want to do. And I could tell you stories that would just give you chills about the impact that this program has had in hundreds of thousands of young people across the country.
It's amazing.
So what we do is we go and we present with anecdotal stories about kids demonstrating in their everyday life integrity. Not physical courage. Physical courage is easy. Go jump off
Right.
the high dive, get
It's a-
enough
it's
guts
a
to go
totally
jump off the
different
high
thing.
dive.
Totally different
Moral
thing.
courage is different. Ethics. You know, I tell kids all the time, your challenges are not going to be from a hockey standpoint or learning a calculus formula. You'll figure that out. You'll figure out how to get through Cal U or Pitt or to make the team. But your biggest challenges, like all of us have, are the moral and ethical choices that we have to make. And as a 15-year-old, you're making difficult choices every day by this.
You're exactly right.
And so what are you thinking about? So that type of and these are stories. It isn't death by PowerPoint. These are stories of young 18-year-olds, 17-year-olds
Excellent.
that are doing service, not just picking up the trash on the street, but I mean real semester-long service projects, dedicating them. And what we do is our 5 words that we have are, if not me, then who? Think about that.
Perfect.
Fantastic.
And
Perfect.
Paul Brand came up to me at
He's a
the
good friend of mine.
baseball movie at Ringgold the other night, last week.
Okay.
And we did this prayer breakfast, and my talk was on, if not me, then who, to the Ringgold seniors that attended. And he says, you know what, Dave? He says, I can't stop thinking about those 5 words.
That's awesome.
And he says, I want my force. And so the other day at the cemetery, I took in fact, I took it off, and I usually have it on here. It's a wristband that says, if not me, then who? I gave it to him. I says, I'll have the rest of them for your force. So those 5 words are 5 words that Travis, the story real quick about those is he and his brother-in-law go to an Eagles game in between his deployments. His brother-in-law is named Dave. They're coming out of the Eagles game, and Dave says, hey, Trav, if I kind of push you, you sprain an ankle, you wouldn't have to go back to Iraq, would you? And Travis was a little bit of a jokester, but Travis kind of wheeled around on him and said, are you nuts? If I don't go, somebody less trained is going to have to go. So if I don't go, who's going to go? If not me, then who?
Not me, then who? Right.
So Dave comes home and tells Travis's sister, Ryan, who runs the foundation now. I said, man, you can't believe what Travis did. What he said to me about how serious he got about how he feels about going back.
Right.
And he was killed on that deployment. So those 5 words are the foundational DNA. And I just came back from 2 days of a leadership summit in Philadelphia around the foundation.
Okay.
And you can't believe the young people that now the foundation is over 140 people, full-time staff, plus volunteers.
That's impressive.
And very impressive. But these are young people.
And this is a national scope
thing.
now.
And you know now you can major in in running nonprofits.
Right.
You can go to a college, a university, and get a degree in nonprofit management.
Yes.
The 501c3 world.
Yep.
Well, this foundation is just loaded with people like, I'm not into making my next first million. I just want to help people.
Right.
It's incredible. So that whole, if not me, then who? And then what else we do is we kind of say we challenge the living by honoring the fallen. So
Okay.
we'll take, when I do a presentation, I'll look in this area and I'll find who was killed in combat, a first responder or a Marine or a Navy SEAL. And when I first came back here, it was right when there was a cop killed over near Cannonsburg. His name was Bastion.
Yes.
Scott Bastion.
Scott Bastion. Yep.
So he's my first responder that's
Okay.
up there. And then I got involved with the Homeless Veterans Center in Washington, downtown Washington. And it's called the Kovacic. That's a long Polish name.
Yeah.
But this center was built, and we got involved with dedicating it. And the woman who's the receptionist there, her son was killed as a Marine. So I have his picture up there.
Okay.
So if I go to Latrobe, which I did, Ligonier and Latrobe High Schools, I'll just Google, and it's up online. You can
Yeah,
find out
sure.
anybody. So we challenge the kids, the young people, to go find out who Jamie Protin is. So go find
find
out
out, yeah.
where he went to school. What were his interests? Did he play ball?
Who was he?
Who
Yeah.
was he? And,
Yeah.
and then if you're going to do a project, if you're going to do some service-oriented work, do it in his honor.
Right.
And you, the stories are eye-watering across this country. Young people, young students, young athletes that are doing things in honor of a fallen. And it could be a firefighter that walked into that building that never walked out, or it could be a Navy SEAL at the
Right.
tip of the spear.
That's exactly
So
right.
this foundation does those things. So these leadership character does matter talks. In fact, I'm going out on Monday to Messiah College. I don't know if you've ever heard of it.
I have heard of it.
It's in,
Yeah,
it's
sure.
in Mechanicsburg. Well, the state police, Larry Maggie's a good friend, Marine.
Sure. Good guy.
And they run, a state police runs, in addition with the American Legion, a camp. If you too want to be a cop, a state police, or maybe even go into the military, they recruit kids to go to this 4-day, they'll come in on Sunday night, and they'll leave, I think, on Thursday.
Okay.
So I've been doing this for a couple of years. They didn't have it during COVID, but there'll probably be 100, maybe 150 kids across the state of Pennsylvania. The Pennsylvania State Police funds this. And I do
Impressive.
this program out there. So I'll go
Okay.
out there and do that on Monday. But this is where I think that we have to put our effort are in young people. It's just me.
No,
You
I
know,
agree.
and-
I can't agree with you more, as a matter of fact. I think that when you think about the future, right? It's not
Yeah.
in us. You
No.
know, we're relatively, we're come right after each other. But
Yeah.
my man Nick's 19 years old.
Yeah.
Right. He's going to
Yeah.
be 20.
Yeah.
This is the future we're talking about.
That's
right?
exactly
And-
right.
And even younger than him, with our grandkids, for example, and his son. I watch his son in hockey. My grandsons play hockey, and just to watch the way he carries himself.
Yeah. Yeah.
And but we were walking into the tournament a couple weeks ago. I told you he walked in with me, and I said, "Hey, dude, how you doing?" And he said, "I'm tired of this, I'm that." And I said,
Yeah.
"You gonna be able to do this?" He said, "Oh yeah."
Yeah.
But- and he's like walking like this,
Right.
like us, like a 70-year-old man. He's, "Oh yeah, So, but that's as my thing is. And I coached high school sports. I coached high school
Yeah.
basketball at Bell Vernon and Charleroi, and being around young people. And when I started, a lot of those guys are in their early 40s now, right?
Right.
So, but kids are kids at their core, right?
Yeah.
Teenagers are teenagers, just
Yeah.
like we were.
Right.
They get the same things are going on. They have more access, and I think that's the biggest difference in my mind is the access. And you wonder sometimes,
Yeah.
what would we have done with this?
Yeah.
I mean,
I've gotten into a lot of trouble.
yeah. So,
Yeah.
there's, I think the kids are kids, and I think that we owe it to ourselves as, I've been in the engineering business for 40 years. I'm not an engineer by education, but I've been in the industry for 40 years, okay? So my biggest thing is, at this point in my career, is doing it right. It's mentoring, it's
Yeah.
giving back
Right.
to young people, and that sounds like that's where you are. And I love this foundation. You gave us a thing here with Warriors Rock, which is going to be down at the Aquatorium in Monongahela, July 3rd, a concert. Tell us a little bit about that.
Now let's flip the gears here, flip the switch here. Now we're to veterans.
Okay.
Okay, so
And
that's...
this is not the Manion Foundation.
has nothing to do with the
Okay.
Manion Foundation. A few years back, I met some people. They gave me a call and said, "Would like to interview you for an event called Warriors Rock." And they came to the Monongahela 250th anniversary. They played. Gary Rakin is a name. He grew up in Republic, PA. Phenomenal singer. He's like 70 years old, and he has I think my wife said, a 6 or 7 octave range voice.
Wow.
It's 70 years old. When this guy sings like Frankie Valli, it's the real deal.
No
It's
kidding.
phenomenal. Well, we saw them at the 250th. It's like, wow, it's like 17-piece band, brass, you name it, it's on the stage.
I remember them. Sure.
And
I was there.
well, they do this program where they want to honor veterans. And I added down at the bottom of this, what I'm trying to do, you know, when I say connect veterans to the communities, a lot of people aren't aware that less than 1% of our population, and it's been like this for the last 10 or 15 years, less than 1% serve. So you think about that. Less than, I forget what the actual percentage is, but are out protecting us. Now,
Right.
our military is abroad. Your son,
Yeah.
that's his responsibility.
Right.
So the bad guys don't come in the door.
Right. Right.
First responders are right down the street here
They're
in
here.
Menneson.
Yes.
Okay, they're walking into the burning building. They're taking the fire
Mm-hmm.
down the street at a robbery, or they're trying to, when you call 911, they're
Sure.
coming to your house. So I really speak with first responders in the same light as I do veterans.
Mm-hmm.
They all made a choice.
I can see that.
To serve.
You don't draw a line.
I don't draw a line.
There's no line there.
Okay, just because, you know, somebody says, I want to be a state cop or a county cop or a local police
Right.
cop or a local city cop. But this event will interview, they'll have a production team that'll come to your house and interview you. Let's just say that Jack was in the Army and he spent an enlistment in the Army 4 or 5 years. He did his time in Germany. He comes back and he goes to Cal U and he moves on with his life. The Army was a positive part of his life. He's got a little bit of a story to tell. So they'll interview, they'll ask 5 or 6 questions, and they'll just kind of get a little bit of idea of why did you choose to serve?
Right.
What did you do? Where? And then they'll also ask, is there any music, any songs that when you hear remind you, or when you were deployed to Germany and you were in the military, if you heard a song? And we all have this. I can, and now I am going to date myself, and Jamie, you're right there probably with me. I can remember when I hear certain songs, like from the 60s, I can remember Red's Beach Dancing.
Exactly.
Okay, I can remember going on Monday nights to Red's Beach Dancing.
You're exactly
And I can remember back in the late 60s, the place to be on the weekends was a Mon Valley Catholic dance. They were the school that had the dance in the valley.
The dance.
The dance in the
dance.
valley. I mean, we would have kids from all the high schools, and there was a song there that they played at the very end. And my wife today was my high school girlfriend, and it was called High on a Hill.
I know.
And when they ended the dance, because Mon Valley sat up on a hill, it was this slow dance. And to this day, when I hear that song, and you only hear it kind of around Pennsylvania, I never heard it in San Diego. But, well, Gary Rakin and his band, when they interviewed me, they played that song.
No kidding.
Or it could be a Vietnam era guy, and he's just,
Right.
whenever he hears a Rolling Stone song, that type of thing, he thinks
Yeah.
about being in the bush in Vietnam.
Yeah.
So this group, this event, just pictures 7 or 8 veterans sprinkled throughout 2.5 hours of music. And the music is phenomenal.
What a great
I
idea.
mean, the songs, the patriotic songs, the service songs, the songs with the veterans that, you know, kind of identify with. And that's going to be on the 3rd of July. Now, we're sandwiched in between at the Aquatorium our regular Rockin' on the Mon concert, which is a local band, Six Gun Sally, and, you know,
Right.
Dave Barb.
Good guys. Yep.
And
Great
all these
band.
guys. Just saw
Yep.
Dave the other day
Dave's the best.
at a restaurant, and I grew up with their keyboard player, Danny Rock, and I haven't seen him since Transfiguration School. But anyway, all that to say, we're sandwiched in between that group playing on Friday night for the Rockin' on the Mon concert,
Right.
and then Sunday is the normal 4th of July fireworks, and I think they have a band then. But we're that Sunday night from 7 to 9, 9:30, and we're out trying to
Okay.
fundraise now because the music is pro bono. The musicians, they do this for the veterans.
Oh, okay.
But what has to happen is we have to fund the production cost.
Okay.
So I'm out running around. In fact, on my way from here, I'm going to talk to Senator Barlotta and going to
She's done the show.
and try and have her involved. I know her son maybe be a potential person to interview because he's a Marine. I don't want to say was, is. So all this, I'm just going around to people that are kind of, and everybody you want to say is veteran friendly.
Anybody listening, David, how, if they wanted to make a contribution to this?
If they want to make a contribution, probably the easiest way is to get a hold of you, I guess. Because here's the 501c3, the Warriors Rock in Greensburg, the tax number. But I'm running around to all the businesses, the banks, the Walmarts of the world, and we have to come up with we have a target. It's in the $20,000 to $25,000 range. For the production. You see the production here, what all this equipment costs.
Is there information on the warriorsrock.org?
On the Warriors Rock, you could go YouTube. If you YouTubed Warriors Rock, and if you scroll down and you went like to Connellsville, you could find the one where I was. And
Okay.
there's a World War II veteran lived up in Greenridge Drive, Bob Yowen. He's since passed. He was with the 8th Army Battle of the Bulge. He was a ball turret gunner on a B-17.
Wow.
He was interviewed with me.
Wow.
And so all this is all part of that. YouTube it. You can Google Warriors Rock. And they just did one on the Midway. The USS Midway is a carrier in San Diego.
Right.
It's a museum there tied up at the pier. They just did one there in the fall. And they're coming here. They want to do one. They love the Aquatorium.
It's a
They
great
were
venue.
kind of exposed to it at the 250th. So that's the effort now in the 30 days is to get out. Don't need, a lot, but we're appreciative of every $100 check and then there's some presenting sponsors that we're looking for to be kind of,
The bigger picture.
The bigger picture
Okay.
from
Well,
support.
it's the www.warriorsrock.org, or you can reach out to General Papak and also Laura Magone. Laura Magone is very, very involved on social media. You can reach out to her on Facebook or in other platforms. And and you can see her around Monongahela with the Historical Society and so on and so forth. So Laura's very accessible.
Yeah, Laura has been we're all on the same team, but one of the two points I want to quickly make is one, this is not just a Monongahela event.
Yes.
This is
National.
it's a mid-Mon Valley. So we were up at the Charleroi Legion last night.
Okay.
I'm talking to Larry Maggi from Washington and everywhere in between. The legions, the people where they're veterans.
Sure.
So I want to include that. And then the proceeds, half the proceeds will go to a veteran service organization. Now, I've just become really somewhat familiar with these posters that are on the telephone
banners,
poles.
yeah.
The banners.
Sure.
Well, I'm finding out that those have to be maintained.
Yes.
They have, and there's a cost to that.
Right.
And say in Monongahela, Don DeVore is responsible for a lot of the maintenance of those things, and that fund is almost fully depleted. So we're going to talk about maybe the proceeds that we're going to go to a veteran service organization, maybe they go to each of our communities to help support that banner program.
And all the communities struggle with it because every community in the valley has budgetary constraints.
Yeah,
Right.
right.
I mean, it's tough. Our tax base has dwindled. It's nowhere near what it was when you and I were kids
Right.
growing up.
Right.
But at the end of the day, that program, that banner program, was so popular and so well received.
Yeah.
And I think that's a great worthy
When
cause.
I have visitors that come here and they drive down the streets of these towns like in Monongahela, it's like, wow, you put all these people's picture and they're from World War II and that's their photo and you knew their dad or you played with their grandson. I said,
You
yeah.
just look at the last names.
Well, it's
And you
amazing.
just go
It's-
and you look at the. We
it's
spent when
amazing.
everything first went up in Monongahela. We spent an afternoon and just
Yeah.
went through and we found Bunny's path and then we traced. You
Yeah.
just trace everything.
It's a
back.
great thing for our grandkids.
Oh, absolutely.
And the legacy of these individuals.
Sure.
Whether they spent 2 years or 32 years, it doesn't matter.
It really doesn't. You're absolutely right. And it's a, we have a history with the military here.
We do.
In the entire Mon Valley. During World War II, I believe, and I'd have to research this. I'm pulling it. I'm approximating, but and Larry Maggie's the one who told me this. The Mon Valley sent more of our young men to battle to World War II per capita than any other portion of the country. Any other region in the country.
Yeah.
And Wheeling Pittsburgh Steel, the Allenport plant, they were given presidential awards for production during the military war effort. I wish I should have done my homework. I wish I would have had those numbers, but it's mind-boggling. It really is. When you think about who we are, I mean, this part of the world literally not only built this country, but defended this country.
Yeah.
And this is a wonderful opportunity for us now to
It is.
bring that history to our kids and to our grandkids, right?
And again,
this is a great
just
opportunity.
it's the basics. Just boil it down to the bottom line is we want to connect people in the community to walk around his coffee shop with something that has to do with veterans.
Sure.
And for your grandkids and my grandkids to realize in the course of their formation years that our freedoms, the way of life that we have, whether you
Paid
agree with it now, good, bad, right, or wrong, is because
Right.
of these individuals.
It was paid for.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you're exactly
that's
right. What's the old adage? Freedom isn't free,
Right.
Yeah.
right?
And every generation is going to have to kind of step up. And this has to be, we talk about the leaders of tomorrow in that other program, that Character Does Matter program.
Right.
Well, we talk about that.
That's
You may not have to lead a SEAL platoon or a SWAT team, but in your business, the decisions you make as a
sir.
businessman,
Yes, sir.
it's all tied together.
It's all tied together. And young people, leadership is not something that's routinely taught
No.
in any university curriculum.
No.
Right?
No.
So when you come out of college, just any engineering curriculum, we'll use that. You're coming out of there at 22 years old, and you are going to be walking into a job where you're making a living. Your first day on a job, you're making more money than your
Yeah.
father, your grandfather likely ever made. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
But you have no idea what to do with that responsibility or how important and impressive that opportunity is, right? And that piece, that character building piece, is so glaringly absent from university curriculums, and not just in the engineering industry, but from top to bottom. That is the benefit of the service academies, because that's where the leaders of our
Yeah.
country come from.
Yeah.
And think about, and I'm sure this is on your mind, because think about where we're going. As a global community, just look at what's happening in Ukraine, right?
Mm-hmm.
Totally unprovoked. They're invaded. I mean, there's nothing that could happen to us,
Right,
right?
right,
9/11 proved that we're
exactly
we're vulnerable. We have vulnerabilities.
Yeah, we're very touchable.
And we got spoiled because we
We're
were
untouchable.
yeah,
for a
we were,
long time.
and we're the greatest show on earth. We have the most power. I read a book, the most powerful mechanized army, the most in the history of Earth, was Nazi Germany. Up until that point, before the U.S. got it, that was the greatest army ever assembled in the history of Earth, right? And who's to say something like that couldn't be assembled again? We still don't. I don't think we take our military seriously.
Well, this is another time, another place, but when you bring in the word China,
Right.
we don't need to go there now, but I'm telling you,
Yeah, how would with your background? Okay, you're put your stars back on for a minute. How would you possibly, from a strategic standpoint, engage in a conflict, a conventional war with China with several billion people,
Now, David, do you
with a
think-
military? I mean,
On that question, do you think I was listening to Joe Rogan had a guy on?
you
and
you
he-
watch other podcasts?
No. Bonnie was telling me about
Well,
it.
she and I are gonna have to talk.
You're gonna, yes.
She and I are gonna have to talk.
He had a military guy on, and he said it's to think their guerrilla warfare will probably be absent, and it'll be drones and things of that nature. And do you think that that's the way that, if there is a next one, which in all likelihood there's going to be something, do you think that's how it goes?
No, I don't necessarily. I mean, to make a statement like, well, we're not going to still have to have boots on the ground, a foot soldier kicking in a door somewhere in an urban environment. I think we're always going to have that. Now, the whole idea of the weapon systems, you're in the engineering world, so you know that the tech that we have now, just in a few years.
Right.
I mean, I've been retired over 10 years now, but I look and see what our aviation systems are, our weapon systems, and the direction that our military is moving. You know, there's an acronym called DIME, D-I-M-E. There's diplomatic efforts, there's intelligence efforts, there's military efforts, and there's economic. You know, so those 4 areas all come into play, and the military part ties in with all of them.
Right.
Okay, and so to say that it's going to be all, but the whole China question, and I'm certainly not. I mean, I'm just like I joke. I've been hitting the head too many times in an old Marine. But the fact is, though, it's going to be a whole different set of rules of engagement and so on. When you start talking about this technology of unmanned, let's just say that the drones is unmanned vehicles, and I mean, they're landing aircraft on carriers now without pilots.
Without pilots.
You know,
I mean, look at what Tesla's technology is trying to do right now. They are talking about entire roadways from coast to coast in which you sit back and relax.
Yeah.
And I mean,
But well, all this tech that we have, and I always used to tell Marines that were, you know, I had the honor of commanding or leading. You know, at the end of the day, we could have the most advanced technology, and you're looking at it right here. But at the end of the day, there's still a Marine,
Right.
that's either paying you, feeding you, supporting you in some way, teaching you how to shoot, whatever it is. It's still people.
I don't think you ever eliminate the human.
You're not going to.
I don't think you can
eliminate that.
Right.
But when you have the population that they have, when you have the money that they've spent in their military in the last generation, we need to take notice in what they're doing and so on. So that's, again, that ties into a whole other thing. But I think your question is, I don't think you can actually say that it's going to be. It would be no, I don't think so.
Interesting stuff. Interesting stuff. So in wrapping everything, bringing this all back together, I want to touch real quick, and I'd be remiss if I didn't. You know, one thing that we do here, and it's probably more important than just about anything, is high school football. And you were.
I'd like to think high school hockey is at
you
least
were,
a close
well,
second.
it's
At
second.
least a close second.
Yeah. But you were pretty fair ball player. You know, all conference a couple of times.
Oh, geez. Yes.
Okay. It's all relative. It's all relative. Okay? And I mean that in a good way. You know, I went to a Catholic high school where all these feeder grade schools from the valleys, where these towns would have 2 and 3 Catholic schools.
Sure. Yeah.
And again, I was at the very early, I think, it was still Monongahela High School, but Ringo was the name was just coming in. So, and I played baseball in the community, you know, Harry Sickles and Pony League.
Sure, yeah.
So I was
Remember
around
Harry.
these. I was around these athletes growing up. So all of a sudden now, my parents want me to go to this Catholic high school. Well, there were kids that I had kind of grown up with, like the Velickis in Donora,
Sure.
and Caruso's in Charleroi, and so on and so forth. And so a lot of them were going to Mon Valley, and then, but they didn't have the sports program that Donora, Mon City, Charleroi had.
Right.
We didn't even have a baseball team, so that kind of forced me to stay into the Colt League, community type, whatever.
Sure. Yeah.
But we had a football coach only for a year or two at Mon Valley. His name was Jack Bishofsky. And this guy came, he was a Marine. He came from a little school in Tennessee, Austin Pay.
Yep. No.
And
Well.
he rolled into this Catholic high school, and he just took it by storm. In fact, if he'd have done some of the things today that he did back then, you know, who knows where the outcome would be. But he just started, and John Hogan from Charleroi was
Sure.
the quarterback.
Uh-huh.
Kikla, that name, and from, you know,
Yes.
the whole Eddie Kikla baseball thing. But he
Right.
had younger brothers that were great athletes at Mon Valley.
Really?
You know, DiMarino, the basketball player from
Yes.
Denora. So they were good athletes.
Oh, yeah, yeah,
So I
absolutely.
just kind of come along, and we had a couple good years with Tom Donahue was the Steeler guy was my coach my senior year. But Mon Valley had hired a bunch of coaches, the Richard Pepe's of the world and Phil Pergola's. These guys kind of just really were fresh out of college a year or two,
Yeah.
and they came to this private school. So to say that we had a good sports program, I think it was a good, and there were good athletes. You know, the
Right.
Hogans and DiMarinos were cut
Right.
above everybody. But when we would go play, Al Valicki and I talk about this all the time. We're in 9th grade. We go to play North Catholic at North Park. And we're like 20 kids, 25 kids or whatever. We look across the football field. North Catholic gets off, and this is when they were all boys school. They must have 60, 70 kids on a 9th grade freshman team.
Freshman team.
You know,
Yeah.
and Canavan, Tom Clements, and all these
Oh, yeah.
good guys, you know, South, Central. That's the world we were in until my senior year. Then the Bishop Boyles and the Sarah Catholics, Greensburg Central, Geibel, they kind of started to figure out that, hey, you know, we've got to do something with these private schools.
Right.
So all that to say, I would consider, you know, looking back, just a good, solid kid that worked hard. I always tell people, I just worked harder than anybody else.
That's exactly right.
I just worked harder, lifted, ran more. Back in the day, Ravaggio and I would hitchhike to Mon Valley. I'll never forget, we're in 9th or 10th grade, and what comes into the building is a universal gym. Remember the universal gyms?
Remember. Yes, I do.
Had all these pipes and whatever, and you're like, okay, you look at that
Those
thing like,
shiny blue pads on it. Yeah,
God, I'm going to get hurt with this thing.
Yeah.
And we would be out in the parking lot because our football field was just stones and rocks. You know, we would look over at Charleroi new high school and say, oh man, if we just had a
I grew
field
up
like
right
that.
over here.
You know,
Yeah.
so we'd be out running sprints in the parking lot because the band director lined off every 10 yards for the band to practice. I mean, we did crazy, but I did things, you know, and I think that kind of stood me well when I went to Navy.
As you say, do you feel that contributed to your?
Oh, there's no doubt.
The character.
There's
piece.
no doubt.
I mean, the character.
When
piece,
I
that's
went-
where that comes from.
Yeah. When I went to the prep school, I thought, oh my God, everybody here is pretty good.
Right.
Everybody here is recruited. It's like, oh man. Then I went to Navy as a freshman, and they still had plebe teams then. So then in 1972 was the first year that freshmen were eligible to be on the varsity. NCAA changed the rules.
Okay.
So there were like 6 of us that were kind of pulled aside and really were on the JV team. But we didn't play with the freshmen. Well, that year just gave me, I mean, I was you know, holding a dummy and just, you know, the scout team type thing.
Right.
But that gave me the maturity to get in the weight room, to gain all the weight that I was maturing with, to watch the extra film. Back then it was films, you know, not videos and stuff.
Real films.
Real films.
Real film, yeah.
And do
Ain't
all
no-
those kinds of things. And I just saw people that were all state from 3,000 kid schools, 4,000 kid school, just kind of fall by the wayside.
That's dimension-wise. As a junior and senior, you were 6.
6'3", maybe 190 pounds.
And
I couldn't gain a pound.
Yeah.
I couldn't buy a pound of weight back then.
Yeah.
And I remember the coach, and I did sign to go to Arizona State. That's where I was going to go.
Okay,
There was a guy,
okay.
there was a coach out there named Frank Cush.
Yes.
And
Legendary coach.
He recruited Pennsylvania and Ohio for all of the
He
linebackers
recruited
and
Pennsylvania a
linemen.
lot. Yes.
lot.
There were a lot of
And
Charleroi
so-
kids made their way out there.
I go out there, sign, and then Joe Bugle comes and says,
Mm-hmm.
okay, this is the deal for Navy. Not going to cost you a dime. Comes into my living room, and my mother and dad just fell in love with this guy. And he says, that's where you're
That's where you're going.
type thing. So, but the point though is that that whole maturing 19, 20 years old, that extra year of prep school you know, it was all about academics. In the year of football, I mean, we played Maryland freshmen, Penn freshmen, but I was in the weight room a couple hours, 3 hours a day, you know, because every day
can't beat that.
at these programs, every day at 3 o'clock, you have to participate in something, whether it's intramural, club, or a varsity sport.
Right.
You know, you're not out doing just, you know, whatever. You are focused because their whole mission is mental, physical, and moral development. So the physical development happens 3 to 6 every day. So I'm in the weight room, so I'm starting to mature, and my dad's 6'4", so I knew I had the frame. I just needed to figure out the nutrition.
How to pack it on, how to pull it, how to build it.
Then all of a sudden I go from 200 pounds to 260 pounds. And I had like a 34-inch waist.
There you
So
go.
the whole idea of my upper body strength as a defensive lineman in those prep freshman year and sophomore year, well, so then my sophomore year, we have a coaching change at Navy. A new guy comes in, George Welsh, he literally fires all the upper class. He just said, you guys hardly won a game the last couple of years. In the Vietnam War, kind of, this is the post-Staubach.
Yeah.
And he gives all of us young sophomores a chance. Out of the starting 11, and we had the number 3 defense in the country when I was a senior.
Really?
Out of the starting 11, 9 of us started as sophomores.
Wow.
Of the 11.
Wow.
I mean, so we opened up with Capoletti in Annapolis at Penn State because we played them every year.
Sure.
And then we beat Penn State when I was a junior in a driving rainstorm, 7-6 at State College. We come in, we're the only team my senior year to hold Dorset to under 100 yards. We beat them 17-0 at Pitt Stadium. So we had a great defense, a consensus All-American, Chet Moeller, who he and I talk once a week. So we had a program.
That's amazing.
That really.
There aren't too many people walking around that know, remember
that started, you know, and I look back now, and it was because of some of those early days of just, okay, in the weight room.
Yeah.
You know, just running, doing what we had to do, the films and all that. And that's where you talk about, you know, the athlete, are they willing to pay the price? Well, the price is different today than it was in 1972.
The price is
okay, granted. But, you know, I had, you know, and it wasn't, we had, he's my best friend, we had a consensus All-American in Chet Moeller, defensive back. And back in the days of sports information and so on and so forth, a little bit different than it is today.
Yeah.
But we had a couple All East guys, you know, and I was fortunate to be one of them. We had Chet Moeller. We had the number 3 defense in the country. I mean, we had a good team.
Right.
And we all went on to a couple admirals in that group. You know,
wow.
A lot of senior officers came out of those 9 defensive guys of the starting 11.
Wow.
And when I think back about that, everybody's got their time, so to speak.
Sure.
To me, that was, and then my family, my dad owned Clearview Tavern then in Monongahela. They would come down, and I had a big family. Had a cousin that was an all-state quarterback at Monongahela in the late 40s. In fact, they lost Aliquippa in the WPIL and went on to Florida State. Well, he was a head coach in Maryland at the time.
And that was?
Chuck Brown. His name was Charlie Brown.
Okay.
1949, 1948. And anyway, all that to say, I had a kind of a big family following, so it was a great ride.
That was awesome.
And I think about that all the time, and I'm still part of that whole Navy football thing.
That's great. And I love Navy's coach now.
Yeah.
That's
Numa Talola, absolutely.
You know, they are so blessed to have that guy can coach anywhere, right? But that place is in his blood. Just the way he talks about it, you can tell it's in his heart.
David mentioned his father, and his father was my neighbor before David was my neighbor. And literally, different guy. Different type of guy, no filter, different type of guy. But I will say this, and I don't know if you're aware of this, I imagine you are, but when he says the family was just a fan base in itself, every day that I was outside, and Laddie, David's father, and Laddie would come over, I would have to endure, pleasantly, at least 15, if not 30 minutes of David. When he moved in, I almost wanted to say, hey, remember when you did this? And remember, because Laddie would go over and over. I mean, it was really,
That's
he was
awesome.
so proud. He was so proud.
That is awesome.
It was
rightfully so.
Oh.
But I say this in a very respectful way. He was from a generation that, and and again, if he was sitting right here, I'd tell him, he was reluctant to pat you on the back in front of you.
Yes.
He was reluctant to.
I knew those guys.
I mean, there were times, I got my wings, Naval Aviation wings, and it's like, he just didn't understand the whole world I was in.
Right.
But he would, I can remember as a kid in baseball, Joe Montana's dad, Denny Simon's dad, all these guys are all there, part of their sons. My dad would come from Denora Mill, he'd park his truck, and then he'd give me a little bit of feedback on the way from the mounds to where I live, which is like a mile.
Yeah.
And it'd be like, I hit 2 home runs, 2 double plays, and that's all you can give me
Yes.
is that.
Dave and I,
It's like, one time my wife said to my dad, and God bless him, he died a few years ago, almost at 101, and he said, have you ever told David you love him? Like that? And my dad says, he knows it. He knows it. He knows it. He knows it.
Dave and I had a conversation the other day. You
Yeah,
said you were,
I get it. Oh yeah, I know
you
those
said
guys.
you were working the Pentagon.
Yeah.
And Laddie would show up to see him. He's working in the Pentagon.
Yeah.
And Laddie would show up to see him and say, what do you do here?
What do you do?
Say,
What do you do?
I worked for a 3-star general one time, a Marine general, a good friend, mentor of mine, and he said, I just got promoted to Brigadier General, and he said, well, maybe one of these days he'll get a real job.
That's what he said.
We're in the middle of Iraq, and it's like, he had no clue.
And
Yeah.
I know
Yeah.
Laddie right now is watching right now.
Yeah.
And every time he goes outside and has to mend a cow fence or cut
Uh-huh.
it,
Yeah.
that's when Laddie's the most happy.
If you didn't have dirt in your fingernails, or if you didn't dig a ditch,
That's
that's
exactly
the generation he grew up
That's who I know those
And-
guys.
and,
I know. I could tell you. I could picture your dad.
Yeah.
They were cut from a different cloth.
Yeah.
Right. Well, anyway, listen. This has been a
Probably way
great
overboard.
conversation.
Way long.
Oh no, we can. Nick can
Oh,
edit
good-
whatever
good
he
conversation.
said. We have a good time. Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
you're welcome.
It's
It's my
fun.
pleasure. Jack, absolutely.
Thank
Thanks
you so
for having
much.
me.
Once again,
And,
check
yeah.
out July 3rd at the Aquatorium, Warriors Rock, if you're in town. If you're interested in getting a sponsorship or anything like that, www.warriorsrock.org. So, David, thank you. Enjoy
You're
the
welcome.
rest of your day.
Appreciate it.
And
Okay.
Thank you so much.
All right.